Hi, I'm Christine Cushing, and welcome to a very special offering from the Quarantine Kitchen. Today's a request for my Greek Easter bread. I make it every year. I want to share everything that I've learned with you today. So let's go. There's lots of fun in this recipe, and I want to share with you why it's so important to keep up these amazing traditions. So first thing, I want to introduce you to the spices, because these spices take this simple sweet bread to a whole other level. So spice number one, it's called Mahlepi. Yes, hard to pronounce. In the Arabic kitchen, in the Middle Eastern kitchen, it's also called mahlab. Here it is as a whole spice. This is essentially the seed of this beautiful cherry tree, and it has such an amazing fragrance. And in Greece, we use it in cookies, we use it in breads, and this is what I did. I ground it up in my mortar and pestle. That's it ground. The next spice that's essential is this beautiful little crystal. I mean, it's hardly a spice. This is in fact a resin. It's called Masticha. And here it is ground, again, same way in my mortar and pestle. This comes from a beautiful tree on the island of Chios in Greece. It's such an amazing story, this, but masticha in Greek just means gum, so something that you chew. It's like a gum. And these little drops that look like beautiful crystals are the resin that kind of forms droplets on the tree, and it's hand harvested. Very, very amazing. It's also a drink. It's very popular in Greece. Like if I chew this, it'll actually turn into gum in my mouth. It's amazing. And it's a great breath freshener. Like it's got so many medicinal properties. So my spices are ground up. I also add an additional spice in anise. I love the flavor of anise. It's a little bit kind of, licoricey, but soft on the sweet side. So all these spices are going to be mixed in with my wet ingredients. All right, those are my three big spices. The next thing that I want to tell you about is the yeast. Again, yeasted breads can be challenging, so I've simplified this as much as it can be for you at home, but there's still certain things that you need to know. So what I'm using here is an instant yeast. If you can get your hands on it, really whatever yeast you can find, because I know it can be hard to come by these days. But the advantage of instant yeast is it goes right in with the dry ingredients. So my flour is already in my stand mixer. I'm just going to add the yeast to it, just dry like this, and mix it together in preparation for the rest of the ingredients. So the full recipe is below the description of the video. The difference between this, so instant yeast versus dry active yeast, they are different. This instant yeast goes in with the dry ingredients. Active yeast has to be activated in water. So you can certainly sub that if you want, but you're going to add a little bit more. So this was a teaspoon. If you're going to use dry active yeast, a teaspoon and a half. Full recipe below. Who's ready to make some Easter bread? Can I get my mortar and pestle out of the way? Now, what are we making here? Essentially, Greek Easter bread or Easter bread is a sweet bread, and that means that it's going to have some eggs. It's going to have eggs and sugar and milk, so it's got creamier consistency inside. My spices are going to go in 3 eggs. There's the mahlepi, there is the masticha, and the anise. Ground going in. You can certainly use fennel seed. If you don't have anise, you don't have to add it. But these two spices or these two Greek ingredients, that's what makes it a Greek Easter bread. If you don't have those, this will be just a nice, sweet, fragrant bread. Okay, that's there. Sugar going in. And this I'm just going to mix by hand. I've got some melted, always unsweetened butter whenever you bake. Now, why, or unsalted, did I say unsweetened? Unsalted butter. The reason I always use unsalted butter for baking, for cooking, is because I want to control how much salt I'm going to add. And this way I know how much I'm adding. I don't have somebody else adding the salt for me. Okay, next thing, again, to heighten that flavor is some citrus zests, orange, mandarin, clementine, if you have it. But I feel that this really adds another layer to it. And then this part is just going to be mixed by hand. Already so beautiful. Okay, I'm going to now add a little bit of warm milk to this, just kind of warm to the touch, but not hot. And just stirring this baby all together by hand until just everything is blended. For me, this Greek Easter bread is a tradition that goes back since I was a teenager. So the journey of this recipe is super, super long. And when I kind of embarked on the journey to make it, because I really wanted to know how it was made, the interesting thing for me is I wasn't yet in culinary school, so I was a teenager. I wasn't cooking professionally, obviously. But the women in my family were not bakers. So we didn't have this recipe, you know, passed down from generation to generation. So I kind of had to do some cheating, ask a few people, you know, friends of family, read some books, and it was kind of hit and miss. Let's say mostly miss and less hit. But I have to tell you, I used to make this with my cousin. I remember it like it was yesterday, and it was like a whole day, like a weekend job. So we would make it, it would all be made by hand, and then it took forever what seemed like. So we would have sleeping bags in the living room, you know, as the bread rose, and we would set timers. But it was such an incredible memory for me that I still hold on to that. So now I've really simplified and I've made this recipe so many times now, and it really is synonymous with Easter. And I wanted to sort of share it with you because traditions are so important to hold on to. I think more so in difficult times like now, because the tradition is bigger than we are, than this moment is. So that passing that on and keeping that tradition, it really makes you feel great. So first step in making the dough, the wet ingredients are going to go in to meet the dry with my dough hook. That's all going in. You'll notice I haven't added the salt yet. I like to separate the salt, so I add it last, because when salt comes in contact with yeast, it can kill it, so I like to take that precaution. Let me make sure I have all of that liquid right in there. And we're starting. This process is going to take this part, maybe 5 minutes, but it's about checking what's happening with your dough. So timing is just, again, it's a variable that's so vast. People want to know, when is it done? I'm going to show you what you're looking for. Now, last ingredient going in is the salt. Now that I've mixed these together, you can use kosher salt, you can use sea salt. Again, I don't like using table salt because it is harsh. So let's let that come together. And I may want to use, again, the addition of my rubber scraper just to make sure we scrape down the sides. You see how that can get stuck there? We just want to keep scraping around to bring all the moisture into the center to get ready for the next phase. Who's ready for some Greek Easter bread? This recipe delivers. I'm not gonna lie, you will love it. Five minutes into the stand mixer work with the hook, that very important step, this is what we have. Still looks like soup, but the gluten has started to develop. You see how there's a little bit of stretch in it? Right? But certainly I don't have enough structure. So now it's a job for some hands. So this bench flour is really important. I'm just going to sprinkle the flour on my board. That's That's why it's called bench flour, usually a bench. This is not measured, but this is where all of my years of trials and tribulations are going to help you, because it literally took me, I don't even know how many years to figure out when is it done, like how much flour. Because, you know, Greek mothers, Greek grandmothers will usually, if you try to get the recipe from them, will say, as much flour as it needs. Right, as much as it needs. That's what we're going to go with. All right, so here, going on to the floured surface, and I want to make sure I use all of this. It's a messy proposition, but man, is it fulfilling. Once you make one of these, honestly, it's like climbing Mount Everest. You really feel such a sense of magic has happened. Okay. Now you can take it a little bit further in your stand mixer, add a bit more flour, but the key is not to add too much flour at the beginning, because it seems like it's wet and messy, but then it starts to come together. So you want to do it gradually. That's what I had to learn the hard way. But you're learning the easy way. Want to make sure I get all of this out. And this is the quintessential enriched dough. You've got some sort of fat, some sort of eggs, and some milk usually, and that's going to make it rich and silky and a bit of a denser crumb. All right, who's ready to work the biceps? All right, I start with my scraper. One of these plastic little scrapers is awesome, keeps your hands clean at the beginning. And I keep adding a little bit of flour until I can get it to a stage where it's going to start holding together, okay? The feeling of this is magical, and now that all those ingredients have come together, the aroma of this dough is beautiful. I want to make sure I pick up all of this, just anything on my scraper. Take it off. And then my bench flour is close by, and now it's a little bit of muscle. But I'm not going too crazy with this. It's just having one hand clean like this. And I like to work with one hand and then flip with the other. That's my technique. And it's still going to feel a little bit sticky, right? So at the beginning, you can use your scraper just like that. And this process might take about 7, 8, 9 minutes, again, depending on so many factors. So let's talk about the flour. For these times, I wanted to simplify this, and the request was for all-purpose flour. Normally what I do is I blend all-purpose and I add some bread flour. What the bread flour does is it gives you more protein, so it's going to make it rise more, and it's going to be a bit drier. Because I'm using only all-purpose, it will take a little bit more flour. So have a look at this and see, when I'm kneading this, this is about 5 minutes in, see how it's coming off from the board? But it is still pretty sticky there, right? So I'm safe to come in with a little bit more flour, but a bit at a time, because it does get dry very, very quickly. Okay, and this is not super aggressive, but the scraper helps enormously. I can't even tell you how critical that scraper is. Again. And just like a couple more minutes here until it's a bit tacky, but not super sticky. The big question is, when is it kneaded enough and ready to be proofed or risen? And this is what I had a tough time as a kid figuring it out. That's perfection. So have a look at this. It's still a little bit tacky. So if you actually feel it with your hands, it's a slight bit sticky, but it's just still smooth. You see how it sort of sits? My finger just leaves a kind of a sticky print like that. That's perfect. That's what I'm looking for. So it's still pretty loose. And the key is, if it's feeling sticky, let it sit for maybe 3 or 4 minutes and come back to it. It will relax a bit. Now that, oh, it's so good. I don't want to go with too much flour. It's better to be a slight bit more loose. That's perfection. Look at that. It's now going into a buttered bowl, covered in a, slightly warm place. I don't like doing this in the fridge, although you can do it in the fridge overnight if you want, like if you want to slow it down. I'm going to cover that, and a couple hours later, this is what it looks like. Are you ready? Can you stand it? This is what my cousin and I camped out all night for to make. Look at that. Doubled in bulk, looks amazing. And you notice that I'm tiptoeing around. I haven't punched it or done anything crazy like that. I don't want to let the air out. It's just gently going to happen. Are you ready for this? Here comes your way. Oh, there it is. Oh, if that isn't a thing of beauty, I don't know what is. Now I'm being very delicate with it here. And what I want to do is create 3 braids. And I'm just going to turn it into a slight rectangle to help me out. I have a pretty specific way of shaping it here. Feels perfection. The aroma, if you could just smell this, you would lose it. And look at these bubbles. So what I want to do by making that rectangle, it's going to be easier for me to create 3 strips, and then each of those strips into 3. So I need a little Pythagoras, a little Greek math. It kind of helps that I am Greek. So here, that's my kind of rough rectangle. And I use my pastry scraper. It's easy because the dough is a little bit sticky. So I'm going to mark the thirds just as my little kind of guide here. Again, it doesn't have to be right on the money, but that's going to be helpful. And then each of those is going to be then 3. So we get 3 beautiful braids. Texture of this is so good. And you notice I haven't floured my surface. I only do that in extreme situations. Otherwise, it's going to dry out. Looking good. So we work it 1 at a time, like that, into 3. Just sort of mark it. It's perfect. Then what I do here is I do a gentle tap. As opposed to rolling these out, I just tap them a little bit gently, like that. And that's how we're going to make the perfect braid. Beautiful. Okay, so braid number 1. Gently but quickly. Just tuck the end in like that, and this here to fasten it. And this will be a simple braid. Again, I'm resisting adding any flour, but if it's sticking, I'll add just a touch. And then I just tap them gently to even them out, and then go in with the simple braid. Over, over. I'm being gentle but fast. I don't want to dilly-dally around here. like that. I tuck the last part in like that to fasten it. And there is my braid. That's gonna go right over here. And that is the last one. Oh, all right, an hour. These have got a proof for. I'm gonna cover them up and we'll see what they look like pretty soon. Okay, 1 hour of proofing time. That is the last rise before they go into the oven. Look how great they look. So I just have a little egg wash, so egg mixed with water for the top. That's gonna give them that glossy sheen. And at this point, when my cousin Debbie and I were making these as kids, when this timer went off for the final proof to go in the oven, we knew we were very close to our destination. Oh, that sheen is what I'm talking about. My oven is preset now at about 325 on a convection setting. Traditionally, we would have red eggs in here. I don't have them this year, so I'm not putting them in, but you would dye the egg and put it right inside and bake it with it. That's the symbol for Easter. Okay, these are ready to go. Sometimes people sprinkle them with sesame. I don't ever do that, but you can certainly go ahead and do it. Probably 30 minutes going in, 325 convection. Look at these babies. Okay, they're definitely not done yet, but look at that color. So because of this enriched dough, I went for low temperature, otherwise they burn too quickly. 6, 7 more minutes. 33 minutes, exactly. They are done. Look at the color. Oh, that's all I'm gonna say, really. Look at that deep, dark color. That's why I cook them at that low temperature. Now for me, I like to take these off. I'm gonna cool them a couple of seconds and then I'm gonna cool them on this rack. Then I get to taste. Okay, look at the beautiful color on that. So here's what I'm looking for. Dark color all the way up, bottom, hollow sounding, perfectly cooked, enough waiting. It's all about the slicing inside. This is what we're here for. That's what we're talking about. Look at that. Beautiful texture. This will soften as it cools completely, but look at that. This is where I'm going with that. See that? Soft, beautiful, wonderful crumb texture inside. Oh, I don't think this is gonna make it through maybe a couple of days. Okay, if we highly restrain ourselves, maybe 3, which we must. But look at this. This is what I'm talking about. The fragrance, the texture is insane. I don't know, this might be my best, most favorite thing ever. Incredible. Every Easter, I must make this bread. I have missed it maybe twice in my life when I was traveling, when I was at school. That's what traditions mean to me, and I think it's so important for us to uphold them. That's why I wanted to share this super special recipe that I've worked practically my whole life coming up with. Thank you again for spending some time with me in the quarantine kitchen to share this beautiful bread. Hope you're well. Please keep in touch. Thumbs up, share, let me know what's happening in your kitchen. See you next time.